not surrendering this story for sure.
The story at all. But thanks a lot, Yash, for that exclusive news break. Thanks a lot for joining in. And let's pose this question now to Jyotivardhan Jaipuria from Valentis Advisors, who is joining in now. Jyotivardhan, good morning. Thanks a lot for joining in. You heard the story that Yash made right now. There's been so much flip-flop surrounding these insurance companies. At a time when these companies were going public some 5-6 years ago, a lot of these analysts on the street were saying that insurance is a very long-term play. But if you look at the last 1 year returns or even the 5-year returns as well, most of them have been underperformers. How much long-term is long-term for these insurance companies?
Yeah, so, generally we've avoided all these insurance companies because for us, the banks have offered better value and banking is the space which we've been playing at. We continue to like the banks rather than the insurance companies at this stage also, because I think, the banks have, in a rising economy, the banks have credit growth, which is good. Second is, they have NPLs, which have, ceased to really concern the investors. And to that extent, the underperformance over the last 15 months in the banking space has given us opportunity to buy. So even in the last couple of shows, I said, though the market turned like banks today, I think the banks are the space where probably will make decent money over the next 1 year.
But even banks have to deal with a lot of sudden regulatory hiccups here and there, right? Even the biggest and the best of them, Jyoti. I'm, of course, referring to what's happening with KOTAK. So, how are you looking at some of these developments? And in case you can sort of get into a view, does an event like this for, say, a KOTAK Mahindra Bank, does it present a buying opportunity? Or does it mean that this is going to be a painful journey where resolution is going to probably take a couple of quarters?
Yeah, so, Surabhi, without getting into specific on KOTAK, if you just think over the last, few months, we've had a lot of regulatory issues which have hurt, individual stocks. So what you have to be cognizant of, even when you don't buy these stocks, is each bank can go through this. And so you need to do a stress test on all of them. In general, I would say a lot of banks over the last few years have grappled with technology issues because, technology is changing. I guess, everybody's customer base is increasing. And a lot of the large banks also have not really kept pace with, probably the technology changes to cater to this banking space. So when we look at banks and we look at anything which is regulated, we have to put that risk in that, there could be some regulatory approval which hits them. And that's the reason, like, our thing has always been to prefer we buy things which are really looking cheap. So at that price, even if there's some regulatory changes which go against them, we still don't really fall too much and at least a lot of value left in the banks. But anything which trades at very high valuations, there's a risk that, they tend to derate very quickly when you see any regulatory hits coming on them.
Right. Jyotivardhan, I had to ask you about auto because that's the sector of the day that's doing really well. It's the top sectoral gainer as well. The sales numbers will be reported tomorrow. Passenger vehicles, the waiting period has gone down as per what I can read on the preview as well. But there's such a broad gamut, right? Passenger vehicles, commercial vehicles, two-wheelers, four-wheelers, tractors. Where do you find value among all of these, or is there any pocket where you do find some comfort?
So see, I would say relatively between all of them, we are like probably the reverse of what we were 18 months ago. So 18 months ago, we were very bullish on the CV cycle. And then the next was, the passenger vehicle. At the moment, we are like actually negative on the CV cycle. So the space which we find most value relatively is the two-wheeler space. So I think, there are two things going for the two-wheeler. So basically, one is, you'll have monsoons, which are hopefully going to be good. And those start to, probably help the sales of the two-wheeler industry. The second is, relatively valuations are much cheaper. So the CV is where I think, the biggest worry is that, CVs will see negative year-on-year numbers over this year because we had a very sharp CV cycle and probably the sector is starting to flag. The passenger vehicles, this is what we've been highlighting for the few months, that if you look at the waiting period, it is coming down. So they had a dream run because the waiting period was huge and, they could sell anything which they produced. That will start slowly changing and the base levels have gone up for them. So when you look at numbers now, the growth numbers are not going to look interesting. So I would say for us, the top of the chart just now is, the two-wheelers and, the bottom is the commercial vehicles.
Right. Running out of time, Jyotivardhan. So one very quick question on real estate as well, because stocks have gone up almost 100, 200, 300%. You pick up a stock and it has moved up substantially. Do you still find some comfort there as well? Do you see that we are still in the starting point of a prolonged real estate upcycle going forward?
Yes, so real estate will do well. One is income levels are going up, affordability is picking up. But given where the stock prices are today, we prefer to play it through probably the ancillaries to the real estate rather than the real estate companies themselves. And so one segment which has not done very well has been the tile segment. The ones which we really played were the wires and cables, but now the tiles are looking more interesting. They are relatively cheaper. So you don't necessarily have to pay real estate to the real estate companies. You can play it through the ancillaries like tiles.
Jyotivardhan Jaipuria, pleasure as always. Thanks a lot for joining in and sparing time and discussing your thoughts on various market subjects. That was Jyotivardhan Jaipuria there of Valentis Advisors. But it's time for a wrap on this edition of Trading Hour. We leave the Nifty at around 22,730, closing in on the record highs. But from Surabhi, myself and the team that put this show together, thank you so much for watching. Halftime report comes up next.